what I suggest we talk about is, what sort of a world do we live in? And does civics help us think about how best to live in this world? And so hopefully we'll talk about both global civics, but also civics in general, whether this concept, this practice has some utility as we navigate a complicated world. So I have one good news to share, one bad news to deliver, and I suggest we do an experiment and have a conversation. So the good news is that I would argue that we are all members of the luckiest generation in human history. It's a big claim, so let's see whether I can substantiate this and convince you. I believe we are members of the luckiest generation in human history because we lead longer, healthier, more capable, and more peaceful lives than any other generation before us. Okay? So let's start with the longer. Does anyone know what was the average life expectancy 100 years ago in the world?
50.
31.
31.
Today, 72. So no matter where you start the clock, let's say 10,000 years of human history, up until a century ago, we could bring it up to 31. We added 41 years in just the last century. We also lead healthier lives. Things like smallpox, which claim more lives than wars in the past, is gone. Malaria and polio may soon be gone. We lead more capable lives. Think about Wikipedia and Skype. I would argue that Napoleon or Suleiman the Magnificent would have given their right arm and left leg for something like Skype. Today, it's accessible to all of us free of charge. We also lead peaceful lives, and I know this is counterintuitive looking at Syria and everywhere else, but this argument was first made by Steven Pinker at Harvard, and now also supported by data. If you look at each year of the 21st century, tally everyone that has been murdered, has been a victim of a terrorist attack, or has been killed in war in the world in one column, and put to the next column everyone who committed suicide in that year. There are more suicides than violent deaths, meaning you yourself are a greater threat to your own security than 7.3 billion people combined. This has never happened before. We have never lived in a world where we are the greatest source of a threat to ourselves. Doesn't mean that violence doesn't take place or it doesn't grab the headlines, but I would ask you to consider whether it grabs the headlines because it's so rare, that the chances of you meeting a violent death is actually so rare that it's newsworthy. In the Middle East, where I come from, that's unfortunately not the case, but in a country like Japan, for example, you know how many murders there were last year? 6. It's a country with 180 million people. There are no more wars in Latin America. Extraordinary if you know anything about Latin American history. So doesn't mean that this trend is not irreversible. Something may go very badly next year or in 5 years' time. But at least today, we lead a very peaceful life in the world on average. But I think the best news is that we are a learning community. We are learning things from each other all the time. We learn, think about the alphabet. This notion that 30 symbols will be enough to capture all sounds and words in a language. Or the arithmetic system. With 10 digits, with 10 numbers, you can write all conceivable numbers. These were specific ideas that grew in different parts of the world, but today we take all of this as granted. Think about agricultural products. Potato and quinine, both of which came from what is today Peru, changed life in Europe. Without quinine, malaria would have been a huge problem in Southern Europe, and without potatoes, vitamin C intake would have been impossible in Northern Europe. And something like onions from Central Asia is a natural antiseptic and leads all of us, empowers all of us to have safe food. And there is huge utility to the diversity in the world where we can all learn from each other. We learn about political institutions. 240 years ago, some farmers in Virginia came together and said, all men are created equal and are endowed with inalienable rights. That this was self-evident. There was nothing self-evident about this. Fast forward 240 years, suddenly everyone in the world thinks this is self-evident. May or may not realize it to an ideal extent, but the norm that people have rights has been established. We learned this from each other. We are in Sweden. They came up with the ombudsman, that there should be an independent redress mechanism about actions of the public sector. Today, there are ombudsman-like structures in 90 countries, something that we cannot explain with the power of the Swedish gunboat diplomacy, but can only explain by being in a virtual learning community around the world. And what we were talking about at breakfast, we are standing on the shoulders of people who came before us. Think about baby Einstein. And if we had a time machine and could take him back 10,000 years, could we have achieved everything he did without standing on the shoulders of everyone before him? Or if we have taken an average baby from 10,000 years ago and brought her to 21st century, would she have any problem fitting in? No. There is nothing anatomically superior about us. What we achieve together through cooperation. Okay? So this is the good news. You are the luckiest generation in human history, if you believe me. Now the bad news. We have a huge challenge in front of us. We are more interdependent than we have ever been, and we don't know how to solve this problem. So where do we see manifestations of this interdependence? Take finance. In 10 years ago, American financial sector produced a product, which wasn't a very safe product, but that should have only been of interest to them, right? No. When that product fails, everyone around the world loses their job or economy changes. Or when the Greek finance ministry cheated about their debt, that should really be a concern of Greeks, right? Or at the most the Eurozone. But no, because we are this interdependent, this becomes a problem for all of us. Or take health. When Indian mothers overuse antibiotics, and when there is an antibiotic-resistant strain of, let's say, tuberculosis, you in Russia are not immune from this, because that disease is only one hop away in a plane. When we are sitting in these planes with 300 people, the moment they close the airplane door, it's the same air for the next 17 hours that's being recycled. So no matter whether you're sitting in first class or in the back row, you are breathing in the air that everyone has breathed out a minute ago. Okay? In very literal sense, we are in this together. Or when the Chinese farmers pack too many chickens in their farm for efficiency, when there is a mutation in the infection that the chicken have, because 80% of the infections are common to humans and animals, you are at risk of contracting the newest mutation in the avian flu. Or if the Jakarta municipality does not treat its garbage but dumps it into the ocean, the chances are that that plastic particle, microparticle, is going to show up in the fish that you eat next year, because the oceans have no borders. The most epic case of our interdependence, of course, is climate change. For everything else, you can think of an abrupt, costly, but some way of opting out. You can close down all flights if you fear a pandemic. Or if, it will be costly, but you can be like North Korea and pull yourself out of the global financial international trade systems. But with climate change, the emissions from Stockholm and emissions from New Zealand has absolutely the same effect on what happens in Murmansk. Okay? And even the most powerful country is not capable of building a wall and insulating itself from the effects of climate change. So again, in very literal sense, we are in this together. And if we are intent on burning all the hydrocarbons, all the oil, gas, coal under the ground, does anyone have any guesses on how much the temperature increase will be? 8 degrees. This is average. The oceans heat slower. So on land, this is going to mean 12 degrees as early as the end of this century. So here is the puzzle. The luckiest generation in human history is about to bake the world into an unlivable state. So how are we going to share this planet and partly our destinies with billions of people with whom we don't share our countries? This is the puzzle. No other generation had to solve this big and this difficult a problem. So, you know, we are not the first people to diagnose this problem. So there's some solutions. One solution is to do nothing. This you would get, let's say, from the right wing in the United States. Business as usual, continue as is. International relations is what, you know, statesmen do in low-pitch voice in dark rooms. No need to change anything. That's one option. The sort of thing you will get from Sweden and other enlightened countries is better global governance. This is a technocratic problem, so let's invite a few more seats at the World Bank and IMF for China and India and others. Let's build the global fund to fight TB, AIDS, and malaria if there is a global health challenge, stuff like this. So they would think of this as a institutional design problem. And in the fringes, you would have people like the World Federalist Movement who would argue that we should have one world government, that UN should be the world parliament and stuff like this. I happen to think none of these three responses are sufficient. And I go back to civics. And I define civics as everything we do to co-manage our commons. I don't know commons, whether commons translate well into Russian, but it is everything in the middle. It's everything where we share stuff. Civics, as I'm sure you know, comes from the city, right? Cities push us together and intermix our fates. Cities are where we run into difference. Ironically, in Arabic, it's the same term. Medeniyet is a derivative of Medina, the city. And in fact, the city where the Prophet, he wasn't born there, but he chose to live there. It was a city that was formed by a social contract. And to prove that civics is a neglected concept. It's sort of fall out of fashion. And it's only wise people like Lena and Ina and Yuri that argue that this is more important than even democracy. And I fully agree with them. And so I think we need to do a bit of an archaeology and dig this temperament up and size it up. And to show what I mean, I propose we do an experiment. I don't know whether any of you has heard of the Ultimatum Game. This is a game. No, good? Okay. So imagine yourselves walking in the main street of your city, minding your business. Someone stops you. Then they stop someone else walking in the same street. All three of you are talking. That person gives you 100 euros. Okay? And then says, you decide how you want to split this money with the second person. He or she, the second person, doesn't have any say on how the money should be split. Hence the name ultimatum. You are giving them an ultimatum. I will take X number of euros, and you will take Y number of euros. Okay? The second person has two options. She or he can say yes to the split that you have decided unilaterally, and then you take the money as you decided, everyone goes their own way. Or she or he can say no, and then neither of you get anything. Okay? Is this clear? how this is going to be played? Okay. So let me write the possible outcomes. So let's say this is you, and this is the second person. So one option is you take everything, and the second person gets nothing, right? One logical option. The reverse of this would be you will take nothing and give everything to the second person. Or we can do 99 for you, 1 for the other person. Clearly we can do 50-50. Let's add a bit more color. Let's do 75-25, 60-40. Let's do 40-60, and also out of diversity 25-75. So take 10 seconds and decide which out of these 8 options you would choose. Okay? And I'm going to ask you to raise hands to decide where our collective judgments stand. So how many of you want to take all the 100 euros and give 0 to the other person? Don't be shy. It's completely legitimate to do this. Yes, okay, so we have 2. And let me write it with this. How many of you want to take 99 and give 1 euro to the other person? No? Okay. How many of you want to take 75 euros and give 25 euros to the second person? Okay, 3, 4, 8, 9. How many of you want to keep 60 and give 40 to the others? 3, 5, 8, 10, 11. Okay, very good. How many of you want to do 50-50? So 5, 10, 15, 25, I guess. How many of you want to keep 40 and give 60 to the other person? No one? Okay. How many want to keep 25 and give 75 to the other person? 1. Very good. And how many of you want to give everything to the other one? 1. Okay, very good. Is there anyone whose choice we didn't capture in this mix? No. Okay, very good. So, what do you see? This is a game that has been played around the world for 30 years in all the conceivable countries, and you match the world average. Meaning, when this is played, the median is 55 for you, 45 for others. Okay? Does this surprise you? It should, because this is not what the economists tell us, right? What does Homo economicus do? The economists tell you, maximize your gain, don't care about the others, right? And if we took their advice, what would we have done? I don't think we could have done 100 to 0, because the other person can say no, and then you lose everything. But you could do 99 to 1, because the second person would be foolish to give up that $1, which he didn't have the moment before, right? So he too is going to maximize his gain, and they would need to say yes to this. So why are you going down to 55 euros when you can keep 99 euros?
Because it's not fair.
Aha, it's not fair. Who cares about fairness? Are you supposed to care about fairness? Didn't Hobbes tell us that man is a wolf to other men? Didn't Adam Smith tell us not to rely on the charity of the butcher and the grocer, but on their self-interest to secure our dinner? Didn't Charles Darwin tell us that it's the survival of the fittest? So why are you caring about fairness?
Because without trust, trusting
Because
another
mostly we are the
person.
second person.
And what
in
about
this game.
golden rule?
Okay.
cannot
Well,
survive.
okay, good. Okay, but what is the utility of the golden rule? If we are this individualistic, maximizing, atomistic beings, why is the golden rule not in the dustbin of history? Or could it be that what the economists tell us is not the complete story? Okay. Let me give you a bit more data about what happens in the rest of the world and then see whether we can come up with a social science explanation for why this is. So offers worse than 75-25 is routinely rejected by the second party. Okay? So don't ask me why they accept a 55-45 but reject a 75-25. But humanity seems to be willing to forego 25 euros to oppose unfairness. In this design, there is nothing about you meeting again. So you are meeting a stranger. So if you were in the second position, if you are offered 25 euros, you say no. Who the hell are you to take 75 and don't give me? You are supposed, technically, you are supposed to say, oh, great, 25 euros, let me go out for dinner. This is not what humanity does. Also, when you do a 40-60 split, that is, if you give more than 50% to the other party, in most countries, this is rejected.
Suspicious.
Who are you to give me this much money? Am I going to owe you something? Who do you think you are? Do you think you are superior than I am? Okay. Again, interestingly, if you are told that the offer is not being made by another human being, but is being made by a computer, you accept much lower offers. We are not expecting parity from computers, but we are expecting parity from other human beings. One final data, and then I'm going to move on. In a different version of this game called the Dictator's Game, same idea, two people meet, 100 euros is given to you, but the second person now does not have the option to say yes or no. You decide everything and your decision is final. What do you think humanity does then, or where is the average? So it goes from 55-45 to 70-30. When we no longer fear the other party, we nevertheless give 30 euros to the other party. 1 out of 4 give 50 euros or more. From an economic point of view, this is completely irrational. Why are you giving 50 euros or more of the money that you can keep to someone who can do nothing to you? Okay? So all of this should nudge us to revisit our notions of fairness, our notions of what makes systems successful. Yes, Darwin was right, but a closer reading of Darwin, hopefully not influenced by Herbert Spencer, does show that egoistic, selfish individuals have an evolutionary advantage, but so does solidaric groups. Okay? Solidarity pays. Solidarity works. Of course, the best thing would be to be a selfish individual in a solidaric group. This way you get all the goodies of trust and cooperation, but you don't have to pay the price. In the Istanbul case, this would be the people in the black Mercedes driving on the emergency lane on the traffic when all of us suckers are sitting in the traffic jam. And they exist, but they are rare, is the argument. Now, one person who recently built a theory on this is Yuval Harari, who wrote this book, Sapiens, which some of you may have read. It's certainly a bestseller in Turkey and around the world. He says we owe the current welfare we have not to the fact that we compete the best, but we cooperate the best. Okay? He asks us to consider one human being and one chimpanzee being left at an island. We visit them back in a month's time. The human being is miserable, chimpanzee is happy. He says, to the same island, put 1,000 human beings and 1,000 chimpanzees come back a month later, human beings got organized, and probably chimpanzees are in cages. What does this prove? He argues that this proves that humanity cooperates with the largest number of the same species, but in the most flexible manner possible. Meaning ants also cooperate, but they have only one mode of cooperation. We cooperate as if we have multiple gears. There is a certain cooperation in the family, in the school, in the street, in the nation, and around the world. That what makes us special is not that we jump the highest, run the fastest, but it is that we cooperate the best. And where is this realization in the standard storyline of social sciences? This, I would argue, is civics. It is our know-how of co-managing our commons. We actually know this stuff. We have neglected this, but we know this stuff. We have the reflexes to at least start a conversation. And conversations are important. So the third and final research that I want to talk about is called the public goods game. This time there aren't 2 people, there are 5 people. Each is given 100 euros again. And in the middle there's a pot. Each of us are asked to make a voluntary contribution to the pot. Whatever gets collected in the pot will be doubled and then will be redistributed equally to all of us. Okay? So it's like paying taxes. You know, if each of us wanted to build the road individually, it won't be very efficient, but if we do it collectively, you'll get a bonus is the idea. Now, in this game, the Ultimatum Game and Dictators Game, there is no difference between nations. So Israel behaves in the same way as Indonesia does, Norway behaves in the same way as Nigeria does. But in the public goods game, when there are 5 of us, there is a difference between cultures. If you trust all the 5 people around the table, what will you do? Put in everything, right? Because immediately it's going to be doubled and returned back to you. If you don't trust anyone, what do? Don't put in anything, because whatever else others put, you're going to get back 1/5 anyway, right? So when this is played, the world average is that people put 1/3 of the money in. So they don't want to be jerks, they don't want to be idiots, somewhere in between. You want to see, let's see what else others do. But the interesting part begins when this is played in multiple rounds. So you put in 1/3, I don't put in anything, I come out ahead. Because the money that's going to, you have put in something from your own pocket, when it is returned back to you, I have more money than you do. I have gotten richer on the expense of your generosity. So after 5 rounds, everyone starts putting in 0. This is the collapse of cooperation. We have collectively produced something irrational. There are 2 things that changes this picture. If you can fine me by paying money, that is, Hakan didn't contribute his share, I'm going to pay 5 euros to fine him 10 euros. Immediately contributions go up, and people understand that there is a cost to non-cooperation. But the second thing is more important. If you allow a conversation before bidding starts, a non-binding conversation, when we say to each other, come on guys, let's not be silly. Let's put in 40 euros. Let's see that everyone does it. Next round we're going to put 50. Right? It works. Hence, the importance of conversation. As I said in the beginning, I think this is a neglected practice of humanity. Think about everything else we do with each other. We have transactions. We buy, we sell, We are instrumental, closed agenda. Everyone knows what they're getting. We have transactions. Then we have debate, this exalted human activity that doubles as deliberation, which I personally find as an improvised activity. How is it possible that Lena and I are going to debate something? Our positions are fixed. We can't change our minds. I will constantly look for the weakest part of Lena's argument, and she will do the same. And even if I'm convinced by her, I cannot admit this. And then it's either 0-1 or 1-0. That's a lousy way of doing human interaction. And this is not really how we do genuine interaction. A genuine interaction is having coffee together and exploring things together, or taking a walk. Willingness to be influenced by each other, rendering the border between us permeable. Allowing yourself to be authored by your peer. That is the essence of civics. And etymologically, conversation means that, changing together, turning together. Now, go back 100 years, we have lots of conversations and a few transactions and a few debates. But all of this took part in the backdrop of the social fabric we wove together through conversations. Fast forward to 2017, we have shitloads of transactions. We buy and sell things, stuff all the time. We have a caricature of a debate, and we don't have enough conversations. This is why people feel a bit peopled out, a bit worn out. They don't feel there is enough of a woven social fabric to carry all that transaction. Okay? Or think about fraternity. What were the three pillars of French Revolution? Égalité, fraternité, liberté, right? Do a Google Ngram search. We have all kinds of discourse on equality and freedom, nothing on fraternity. And if you neglect fraternity this much, Trump is what you get. If you don't listen to people, if you don't engage them as peers, then don't be surprised that people who feel that they are forgotten try to come up with the most outrageous response possible. Mayans, Eduardo Galeano reports, chose the people who listened the best when it was time to choose a leader. We think elocution, rhetoric are the most celebrated skills. But I think Mayans were onto something. What happens when you listen, when you are with someone who listens well? You feel you are heard. Doesn't matter that much whether that person changed their mind, but you have been heard. You have been heeded. You have been taken into account. And I don't think we do this well enough. We don't listen well, we don't talk well, and we don't disagree well. Clearly disagreements, we will have disagreements. But do we need to disagree as badly as we do right now? Is there nothing in the opposite party that is justified? I mean, think about the way New York Times talk about Trump. I'm really, very troubled. It's a caricature, one caricature after another, and gives me no information about why, 48% of Americans voted for this guy. Can we not practice our curiosity muscle as robustly as we exercise our indignation muscle? Oh, well, we are completely distraught. This is a terrible guy. Yes, this is a terrible guy, but is this enough? Can we go the extra mile and try to understand what is he a consequence of? He is cause of something, but he's also a consequence. And if we are this uninterested in our compatriots who have opted for this outrageous option, then I think we are failing our civic duty. So to return this back, as I said, Lena, my heroine, said in Strasbourg maybe a year ago that civics was more important than democracy, and I agree. That we need to get this right, and we need to get this right in forms like this. We are fascinated by vertical relationships, but the gist of democracy, a vibrant democracy, is about horizontal relations. Can we be good peers? Can we listen to each other generously? Listen not with the intent to answer, but listen with the intent to understand. Okay? David Isley, who has the StoryCorps project in the US, is a good phrase. Listening is an act of love. Okay? It comes with sympathy. Can we extend an initial credit of sympathy and good faith to our peers? Because if we cannot, this is the mess we are stuck in. And with this much instrumental reasoning, we cannot manage the global interdependence that we were talking about.